For 75 years, it was the state's top cash crop.
How long had tobacco been in your family?
All of my life, generation before.
But now the golden leaf has withered, and North Carolina has gone hog wild.
Pigs will produce more money, $1.1 billion, mind you, than any other commodity.
But has the prosperity come at too high a price?
I have nothing against someone trying to make money, but I don't think you should do it at the expense of other people.
Meet those who've paid.
Do you have any resentment?
Yeah.
And those who have prospered.
And you've been very successful, certainly, and people like to talk about you.
As WRAL examines the business of pigs, politics, and pollution.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Bill Leslie. What comes to mind when I say $1 billion? Well, whatever it is, I bet it isn't pork. Well, if I'm right, then this is a story for you, because this is the story of how pork and the business of pigs became a $1 billion industry in North Carolina. But this is more than just a story about pigs. It is also a story about politics and pollution. Over the next hour, you will hear from some people who say that North Carolina's pork isn't worth the problems that have come with it. But first, the story of pigs. Because in 1995, economists estimate that pigs will bring more money into North Carolina than any other commodity, including tobacco. Pam Salisbury has that story.
This is North Carolina history. Tobacco. Smoker or not, you can't deny it. Tobacco has been a big part of North Carolina. Ever since 1919, the golden leaf has been our state's top cash crop, right on through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, ravages of disease, and many a Surgeon General. If you were a farmer, as sure as you got up in the morning, you farmed tobacco. It put food on the table and clothing on the backs of children. Just ask Todd and Deborah Balance. How long had tobacco been in your family?
All of my life, generation before, and as far as I can remember, know anything about. It was always tobacco.
For 75 years, millions of acres of tobacco have brought more money into North Carolina than any other commodity. And while our state's farmers will probably never stop growing the golden leaf, they will certainly grow less of it in the years to come. You see, for some of them, the future of growing pigs holds more promise.
We did a real good job with the tobacco. It was just a business decision that me and my mom and daddy and my wife just decided it was time for us to leave tobacco.
And leave they did. On the fields where Todd and his family once raised rows of tobacco, they have built hog houses.
It takes about 15 minutes to feed 240 in there.
First, a finishing floor, and then a sow farm.
These were just weaned today, took away from the mamas.
And inside grows their new cash crop.
Have you ever touched one, Pam?
Plain and simple, pigs offered the Balances a more prosperous future. Tobacco was risky, allotments were scarce and expensive. Giving it up would help everyone, including the neighbors.
Most of our neighbors are tobacco farmers, and with us getting out of the tobacco business, that opened up more poundage and more land and all for them.
The Balances are not the only ones to have caught on to pigs. On farms across the state, hog houses are going up and filling up. That's why in 1995, economists at North Carolina State University say pigs will produce more money, $1.1 billion, mind you, than any other commodity, including tobacco. And that's why at the Department of Agriculture, the commissioner preaches the profits of pork.
You cannot make it in eastern North Carolina just growing corn and soybean and survive. And so what do? You got an opportunity now to go into hog business on a contractual agreement, sure of a market, and that looks back to the logical thing to do. And that's what's happening.
We've got 600 in this room right here.
And logical it is, thanks to contract farming, which allows farmers to raise pigs for companies like Murphy Family Farms, Carroll's, and Prestige. The agreement reduces the risk by guaranteeing the farmer a market for his pigs.
It just felt like the right thing for us to do with getting a long-term agreement like that. And the bank liked it. They felt like it was risky, as it was with the farming, because we've had some tough years.
It's a business decision that's already paying off?
Yes. It's doing very well for us.
It's very profitable for us.
And plenty of other farmers have tried to grab a share of those profits. In just 4 years, North Carolina rocketed from a #6 ranking in hog production to a #2 ranking, with farmers raising close to 10 million pigs. Commissioner Jim Grant.
And they're concerned how much longer is tobacco going to last. And you've got people who used to wouldn't think they'd ever change from tobacco to any other commodity, but they're doing it in the hog business.
Don't expect an exodus from tobacco, though. This year, it is still expected to generate $1 billion in revenue. For now, just $1 million less than hogs. That's across the state, of course. On the Balance farm, it's pure pig profits.
I think it's just going to go hand in hand. We all can't be in the tobacco business, and we all can't be in the hog business, or turkeys or chickens, and we're just going to have to all find our own way.
Still to come, pig pollution versus pig profits, the pitfalls of progress.
A so-called neighbor would come and put 3,000 hogs in your backyard or front yard and stink up the whole neighborhood.
Pigs have certainly provided an economic boost to North Carolina, but the industry has had its share of growing pains. In other words, along with the cash has come some controversy. On one hand, the critics claim that pigs mean pollution, dirty water, dirty air. On the other hand, the industry claims that its image has been tarnished by a few bad apples. Well, this growing debate has scientists digging for proof and neighbor pitted against neighbor.
Country living used to mean fresh air and friendly neighbors.
It's right good farmland. There used to be peaches all over in this place.
But Wilton Parker says that's not true where he lives. This is rural Johnston County, and while there is no big city smog or exhaust out here, the cold morning air is thick with another smell.
It hurts my feelings to know a so-called neighbor would come and put 3,000 hogs in your backyard or front yard and stink up the whole neighborhood.
The stink, says Parker, comes from this hog farm. And while the whole neighborhood might not be affected, a good part of it seems to be upset.
That's your property line, what, right there?
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah, you're right next to it. There's no buffer zone, is there?
No, sir.
Keith SLOCUM's property backs up to the hog farm, and the hog waste is sprayed as fertilizer on land just a few feet from his house.
Those odors should not be here. I don't think it's right that someone should just come in here, plop a pork-producing facility in the middle of a neighborhood who people have been here a lot longer than I have, and just kind of destroy their way of life or curtail it to a great deal.
So SLOCUM, Parker, and other neighbors decided to fight, and in a big city fashion. Their weapon? Parker versus Barefoot, a lawsuit against Terry Barefoot, the owner of the farm.
What is the goal of this lawsuit? I mean, do you want to put this man out of business?
No, I have nothing against someone trying to make a living, make some money, but I don't think he should do it at the expense of other people.
Parker, SLOCUM, and the other plaintiffs claim the Barefoot farm and the hogs on it have changed the way in which they can use their property. The cookouts, the use of their land, all the things they live here for, they say are gone.
Some would say, why don't you move? Get away from it.
I've been here since I bought this part of my daddy's farm in '73, I believe it was, and I built this house in '78. And he came out here in '91. Who's got the right to tell me I've got to move my home from my home and all my family down here?
Terry Barefoot, the defendant, wouldn't talk to us, saying it could jeopardize his case, which is scheduled for jury trial in May. But some say the fact that it would even get to trial is what is alarming.
The areas of the brain that receive odor input, which is the limbic system and also parts of something called the hypothalamus, paraventricular nucleus, etc.
Dr. Susan Schiffman is one of the nation's leading experts on odor. She says this hog farm feud in Johnston County is part of a mental health crisis sweeping across eastern North Carolina. That stress is building to dangerous levels.
Right now, there is not a lot of cooperation, is there?
When I talk to people on both sides of the issue, the farmers and the people downwind, I find that for many years they've been friends, that their families are intermarried, and yet today they don't speak to each other.
Schiffman also says there are studies showing that neighbors to hog farms suffer weakened immune systems.
It turns out that if you are in a situation which stresses you, stress is certainly known to exacerbate other illnesses, to make you more vulnerable to other illnesses.
As bad as it sounds, Schiffman says all this is preventable. So does the General Assembly, which appropriated money to fund the Swine Odor Task Force, a group of scientists aiming to stop the stench from pigs.
The number of hogs produced in North Carolina has tripled.
Preventable or not, odor is not the only concern of hog industry opponents. Also on the list, water pollution. Dramatic tales of waste running onto the ground and into our streams have mobilized critics for years. A few bad apples, according to the pork producers. But there may be other sources of contamination. It turns out that the waste lagoons used on hog farms don't seal as well as farmers once thought.
And in going back and looking at the situation with groundwater quality standards, many of those that were built into the sandier or coarser materials do not seal well enough to do that.
Dr. Rod Huffman, an NC State scientist, says leaky lagoons can lead to high levels of nutrients like nitrate in groundwater. In a recent study, Huffman monitored water around 11 older lagoon systems, all built before 1985.
About half of them had seepage that you could characterize as moderate to severe.
The seepage occurred in lagoons built in sandy soil. New lagoons, which are supposed to be built with clay liners, perform better.
We found that there's very little, if any, detectable seepage coming out of lagoons that were built into good clay materials, and that was without any attention being paid to a liner. So if we use that type of material as a liner, we'll get good performance.
The pork industry is quick to point out that no drinking well has ever been proven contaminated by a hog farm. Maybe, but our rivers and wetlands are a different story. Nutrient buildup in various waterways across the state is a well-established problem. And according to environmentalists, the growth of the hog industry hasn't helped. You see, the waste doesn't just sit there in those lagoons. Farmers use it as fertilizer by spraying it onto fields. And if not applied in the right amounts, scientists say it can be hazardous. The nutrients, including nitrogen, ammonia, and phosphorus, can either run off into streams or seep down into groundwater.
So the fact is, there's a serious problem. There's too much waste going to places it should not go on the land, places it should not go in the water.
Doug Rader is a scientist with the Environmental Defense Fund. According to him, unregulated hog farms could be risky.
Human waste systems of the same size as these hog waste management systems require operators that are trained and certified and overseen in a very careful way. There's monitoring of the quality of the waste, there's monitoring in the water to make sure that impacts are not occurring. None of that happens with hog farms.
At least it hasn't yet, but new regulations adopted in 1992 may change that. The regulations require all farms with more than 250 hogs to register with the state. Farms are also required to have a certified waste management plan. Problem is, without adequate staffing to enforce the regulations, most compliance will be voluntary.
Some people are out there doing a great job. They have lagoons that work. They're very careful on where they put that waste to make sure that it's not over-applied and impacts are minimized. On the other hand, some of them are extremely poorly run.
North Carolina is now dominated by much bigger farmers.
What industry opponents fear is that these poorly run farms will never be brought into line. Critics say the deck is stacked against them, right to the top. For example, the new chairman of the State House Environment Committee recently became a $1 million player in the pork business.
You are building a hog farm.
I'm in the process, absolutely.
Why did you do that? What's the reason for you doing that?
5-letter word, money. They're profitable.
Some argue it's a conflict of interest for Representative John Nichols, the hog farmer, to chair a committee which considers bills affecting hog farms.
Absolutely not. Number one, committee chairmen very seldom vote. They're like the judge in a courtroom. They can vote, but they seldom do. Number two, if it was any issue that I felt a conflict of interest with, I would not vote. I would excuse myself from voting, both in the committee and on the floor of the House.
People angry about hog farms say they can't look to Washington for relief either, not with Senator Locke Faircloth heading up a key environmental subcommittee. Faircloth has an estimated $19 million invested in eastern North Carolina hog operations.
Hello, folks.
Don Webb, who heads up an activist group, has asked the Senate Ethics Committee to look into Faircloth's holdings.
A lot of people would ask, who are you to step up and take on these powerful people?
Well, they put their pants on just like I do and all other tax-paying, poor, middle-class citizens. That concerns me.
Webb says he's upset because Senator Faircloth pushed for subsidies that benefited hog farmers and also tried to weaken laws that crack down on farmers who pollute wetlands.
Common sense will tell you that he can't really make a true good judgment, and he should disqualify himself, get off that committee, because he's got too much power, and he says he's going to help other people, but in helping those other people, he's going to be helping himself.
Faircloth, while he didn't speak with us, has repeatedly denied any conflict of interest. And just last week, the U.S. Senate Ethics Committee decided he was right.
What is the status of your lawsuit right now?
What effect that decision will have in Johnston County remains to be seen, when sometime this spring or summer, a jury will decide the fate of Terry Barefoot's farm and its neighbors, where it isn't the political winds that matter, but the southerly winds.
Does it smell all the time?
Somewhere, I would say yes. But here it don't all the time. When the wind is from the north and northwest, it's bad just like it is today.
Still to come, from pig pens to pig palaces, modern day hog farming is big time.
If I wanted to do what you're doing today, how deep would my pockets have to be?
You're looking at $9–10 million.
To understand the hog industry, it helps to first understand a hog farm. You know, it used to be in North Carolina, all you needed was a few unused acres behind the house, you'd buy a few hogs, and you'd have a hog farm. It was that simple. But not anymore. While pigs are still pigs, farms are no longer just farms. David Crabtree reports on pigs that live in palaces.
That was then.
With this, we keep up with the live hog prices.
And this is now. You see, pig farming in the 90s is something else. Computer screens have replaced calluses.
Of course, I'm interested in the prices.
Money has replaced muscle.
We have monies invested in all areas.
And overalls have had an overall change. Take Craig Quinn's farm in Duplin County, where just to walk inside you need to shower and don germ-proof paper suits. On your feet, special plastic boots over your shoes, all to protect a multi-million-dollar business known as Quinn Farms. But still, suits and boots for pigs?
Most of us would think you'd want to take a shower when you came out of here, not going in. But you said there are certain things we can take in that if we're not careful.
That's correct. Mainly we're worried about tracking diseases in. And it's mostly done with litter on your feet.
This is not for show, this is for reality.
This is for real.
Yeah.
We call the outside world dirty and we call inside our farms clean. Each alleyway is flushed every 4 hours.
And the dirt and disease of the outside world can mean disaster inside one of Quinn's pressure-washed, disinfected pig palaces.
These are animals that were weaned this morning.
This nursery, one of 2 on Quinn Farms, is home to about 5,000 pigs. On the entire farm, 29,000. Yes, 29,000 pigs, each worth about $40. Crunch those numbers, and the paper suits start making sense.
Well, it just depends on how quick we could recognize the problem and react to it. You know, we may spend a few $100s on penicillin and be over it, or it could wipe out the whole house.
And then you're talking a lot of money.
Big dollars.
And while Craig Quinn's farm may seem unique, it's really not. Farms like that have become the rule, while farms like these, where the pigs still wallow in the mud, even on a snowy day, have become the exception. Hog farming has become a big business. That means it takes a lot of land, it takes a lot of high-tech equipment, and it takes a lot of pigs. And it means you better have some deep pockets. If I wanted to do what you're doing today, starting from scratch, how deep would my pockets have to be?
You're looking at $9–10 million.
That's pretty stiff.
That's a lot of money.
Of course, temperature has a big bearing on how fast the pigs grow.
But all that money can make you a big player in what has become a big industry. An industry that has national conferences and international expos. For the right price, you can buy pigs genetically engineered by swine scholars.
It's the genetics that we have brought in. We've imported hogs in from different countries.
Equipment used for artificial insemination.
This is what we believe is the latest advancement in AI equipment, artificial insemination.
And computerized thermostats and feed controllers.
This system here would run somewhere around $40,000 for like a 2,400 sow.
And all this equipment, despite the hefty price tag, is still the supporting cast. The lead, pigs. For pigs are still pigs. And one thing that hasn't changed on these farms is priority number one.
It's what I call a keeper. 10, 11, 12, 18, and 12.
This is the number in the litter?
Right.
Wow.
Welcome to the farrowing house, where 300-pound sows are quick to guard Quinn Farm's newest investments. The only one watching closer is Quinn himself.
With each sow, we maintain an inventory record for her and to keep up with her production. And if she has a history of producing low litters, then we will cull her out and bring in new breeding stock.
But this new breeding stock doesn't just breed more. In fact, the pigs on these farms are changing much the same way the industry is. They're getting leaner, more efficient.
We're basically using a DREZNER boar. They've kept mixing genes and trying to get a leaner animal but still will maintain the fast-growing feed conversion efficiency.
That one word, efficiency, has become the buzzword of the industry. While sows give birth to leaner piglets, the industry gives birth to leaner farms. Big farms with computers. Farms that use artificial insemination. Farms where you must shower before entering the pig pen. Farms that spend money in an effort to save money.
Yes, it's big business. We got a lot of dollars invested in the operation, and you just got to watch it and manage it.
That type of commitment in our business is...
And watch it they do, like hawks. This Quinn think tank, made up of Craig's father, uncle, and brothers, is housed in a converted farmhouse that overlooks a beautiful lake. So beautiful, a visitor might miss the latest issue of the Wall Street Journal sitting on the table, or the computer that quietly displays the morning's latest hog prices. If your grandfather, or those who were in the farming business when he was, saw how things have progressed over the past decades, how do you think they would react?
I think he'd just be astounded.
Astounded perhaps more at the industry than at Quinn Farms, where it seems excellence has been firmly ingrained in the genetics, not only of the pigs, but of the owners.
If we're going to be in it, I want someone to ride by and say there's a nice operation. He's proud of it, he takes care of it, and doing it by the book.
When we come back, this skinny piggy went to market. We'll show you how it got there.
We are much of an industry like the automobile industry. Either you lead, follow, or get out of the way, and we believe we're truly the leaders.
Now, there's one thing about pig farming that hasn't changed, and that is the product. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Pigs make pork, and pork makes everything from pork chops to barbecue. But even that may be changing. Just as we're finding new ways to produce pigs, we're also finding new ways to process them. And one company that has mastered this is Smithfield Foods, and some of their most remarkable work is being done right here in North Carolina. Donna Gregory has that story.
If you are looking for the story of the little piggy that went to market, this is not it. Rather, this is the story of 30,000 pigs going to market, all on the same day. Where, you ask? Here. Welcome to Smithfield Foods, more specifically, Carolina Food Processors, one of the fresh meat packaging plants owned by Smithfield. With its laser sights, robotic saws, and a computer imaging system that separates pork by fat content, it is arguably the most efficient plant in the nation. And yes, it is here that one day soon, roughly 30,000 pigs will go to market. But if that is surprising, wait, there's more. These aren't just garden variety hogs. If you look closely, you can see they are longer, leaner, and yes, skinnier.
The NPD pig from a body conformation is a longer pig, is a leaner pig.
The pigs, according to Smithfield's Bo Manley, not only look different, but are comparable nutritionally to chicken or turkey. And in case you didn't believe them, in vintage Smithfield fashion, they found you proof. Researchers at Duke University's Nutrition Research Center say the leaner pork will be as good for lowering cholesterol and cutting fat as poultry. Dr. Mark DREZNER.
In the study, the clinical study, what we're trying to assess is whether you can have a patient eat fair amounts of pork as opposed to chicken and still come out with a lowering of the blood cholesterol from a level that was elevated at the time of entry into the study.
The miracle pork, available now only in restaurants, come from pigs developed in England by the National Pig Development, or NPD, company. According to Smithfield, they are the product of decades of genetic research.
And how big of a percentage of your business is this NPD pig so far?
Today it represents about 15% of our business, and we hope that over the next 2 to 3 years it'll double.
Now, it's not genetically altered, right? There's no hocus pocus involved.
No, it is merely a process of genetic selection over about a 30-year period.
And that process will pay off, especially for Smithfield, which owns exclusive rights to market the pork. You see, in addition to being bred lean, the pigs have another advantage, genetically lower levels of stress hormones, which can ruin the pig's valuable meat. The hormones are released when the animal is scared, like when that little piggy goes to market, which at Smithfield Foods is inevitable.
If anything illustrates what kind of company Smithfield Foods is, it is its relatively new 750,000 square foot processing plant in Bladen County. When it's operating at maximum capacity, Smithfield can process more than 30,000 hogs every day. And it can sell them, because in this industry it is as important as growing them.
Within the Smithfield family, we have literally hundreds of different brands.
Smithfield sells it all, and they seem to sell it everywhere, part of what Manley calls strategic advantage.
What is some of that strategic advantage? Just the location?
The location that we are within 24 hours delivery time of approximately 50% of the United States public, and that is a day to 2 days advance on our competitors.
And they don't only reach the U.S. public. Just last year, Smithfield signed a deal to sell $200 million worth of meat to Japan. The key? Quality. The Japanese demand it, and Smithfield, because of its efforts at vertical integration, can provide it.
People keep talking about vertical integration. For people who have never heard of that, what does that mean in your industry?
It means the coordination of livestock and raw material to the plant all the way to the retail customer.
And then you process them here and...
That's correct. It allows us to have much greater control over the raw material and the quality of animals, and ultimately the quality of meat products we're able to sell.
Which takes us back to market. It is here that Smithfield claims victory, a superior plant to control packaging.
That's correct. And it preserves the quality of the meat.
Fewer suppliers to control meat quality. Oh, and don't forget, some of their little piggies are skinnier.
We are certainly the largest in terms of trying to produce lean product in an integrated fashion. We are much of an industry like the automobile industry. Either you lead, follow, or get out of the way, and we believe we're truly the leaders.
When we come back, the man who's hogging business in the pork industry.
It's totally irrelevant to us whether we're the largest or not. We just want to make sure we're the most profitable.
This story about pig farming wouldn't be complete if we didn't tell you about one particular pig farmer. But he is no ordinary farmer. He is the country's and perhaps the world's most successful pig farmer. Last year, his farms alone sent more than 2 million pigs to market. That's more pork than many states produce. So who is this extraordinary pig farmer? Well, he is the man who got North Carolina going hog wild. He is Wendell Murphy. Tom Lawrence reports.
The towns that dot the coastal plains of North Carolina have always been modest, country people enjoying country living. Their claims to fame have been equally modest. A politician born here, an astronaut schooled there. Take Rose Hill, home of the world's largest frying pan. Yes, frying pan. What apparently the town doesn't know, or is too modest to say, is that they're also home to
Murphy Family Farms, Murphy Family Farms, Murphy Family Farms.
And Murphy Family Farms is reputed to be the nation's, perhaps the world's, largest pork producer. Even though Wendell Murphy, its founder, will never tell you that.
If you were to sort of take account, is in fact Murphy Family Farms the largest hog producing facility?
I don't know. I don't know. We don't make any claim to that. We read that sometimes in the magazines. I don't know whether that's true or not. It's totally irrelevant to us whether we're the largest or not. We just want to make sure we're the most profitable.
Irrelevant or not, it's the truth. Murphy Family Farms produces more pigs every year than anyone else, $200 million worth. But how big they are is only half the story. How Wendell Murphy got them there is the other half.
And I was traveling with a good friend of mine who was also the math teacher at the school where I was teaching, and we passed by a feed mill up in Warsaw. And this friend of mine says, Wendell, he said, you know, one of those feed mills would go good in our community. And that was just like a bolt of lightning. I mean, it just really shocked me.
Murphy's father, however, saw no lightning, only a pipe dream.
Toughest sale I've ever had to make of all time was convincing my dad to co-sign a note for $10,000 in 1962. This truck is parked on a set of scales.
A product of the Depression, the elder Murphy urged his son to keep his day job teaching school. Murphy, as he's done so many times since, bargained successfully.
I think he finally decided the only way he was going to get rid of me was to go along with that, and he finally concluded that he would do it provided that I would continue teaching and make payments on that note out of my teaching salary. Okay.
The decision was a good one. 3 years later, with the mill booming, Murphy was able to give up teaching for good. He was also able to start raising pigs. They were so profitable, he closed the mill to the public, and to this day, only Murphy pigs eat Murphy feed.
But Murphy's biggest success was born of disaster. In 1973, a cholera epidemic devastated the hog industry across the state. The federal government set up quarantines, and Murphy, needing producers, adapted. He borrowed from the poultry industry and put the proven method of contract farming to work, raising hogs. A number of people would say you're probably the guy who actually started this revolution in the swine industry. Are you that man?
I wouldn't. I don't know that we would. That we started anything. We did what we had to do to be successful. We worked hard. I guess I wouldn't even call it a revolution. I think it's an evolution. I think it is a restructuring of the swine industry that was inevitable. If we hadn't been here, it was going to happen anyway. The one over there, that was the first one.
It might have, but never as swiftly or as surely. During the 80s, Murphy rolled out a network of 500 contract farms across the country and built the infrastructure to service them.
Oh, everything's computerized.
Really high-tech.
High-tech.
Like the Chief, the largest feed mill in North America. Named after Murphy's late father, it is a symbol of Murphy's dominance.
The mill is totally automated. We're making right now close to 18,000 tons of feed a week, and we're doing that with 24 employees, 6 days a week. We're closed on Sundays.
But Murphy provides more than feed to his contractors. From the company's corporate headquarters, which sticks out like a sore thumb in Rose Hill,
He provides technical and financial support. In agriculture, an industry not known for stability, his company is known as a rock.
And that's really the only important thing as we move forward insofar as the business is concerned or the growth is concerned, is that we remain sound and that we remain the most efficient producer that we can possibly be. That's our goal.
And I'd like for Mr. Murphy to live like we live.
That philosophy has transformed the pork industry. Too much, according to some. Even at a hearing in Duplin County, where Murphy has provided hundreds of jobs, his critics are vocal.
With the approval of the Murphy's Farm, that's right.
Their complaint? That as a member of the State House and Senate from 1982 to 1992, Murphy backed legislation that benefited his business. The bills have become known as Murphy's Laws. Like Senate Bill 148, which prohibited counties from using zoning to restrict hog farms, or Senate Bills 93 and 488, along with House Bill 519. The three exempted livestock and feed operations from sales and gas taxes, as well as inspection fees. There was also Senate Bill 386, which, if it hadn't been later amended, would have exempted hog and poultry operations from tougher environmental policies.
I hope I was involved in some legislation that benefited agriculture, all segments and aspects of it, and including the pork industry and the poultry industry. Duplin County is the #1 agricultural producing county in the state, and if I'm going to have to go to the legislature and not represent agriculture, then they need somebody else.
And while Murphy was willing to give up politics, one thing he will not forego is supporting NC State University. Over the years, Murphy has contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to his alma mater and raised much more.
That's my alma mater. That's where I went to school, and without North Carolina State, a lot of us in eastern North Carolina would have a lesser standard of life. In fact, I would say that that everything I know, I either learned from either my dad or North Carolina State University.
There are probably some out there who may be critical to some degree of your involvement with state, perhaps saying that NC State may be doing, because of Wendell Murphy, too much with the swine industry. Is that possible?
I don't see how it possibly could be. Yeah, it's a working farm and it's been here for a long time.
The point being that with or without NC State, Murphy and his 1,400 employees will continue to break new ground. Take, for example, what appears to be a vacant field on Murphy's property.
There's approximately 10 different species of trees that we're studying to see what their nutrient uptake capability is, and also to see what kind of quality of timber that we get from that.
That's right. In what most consider the cloud over the pork industry's head, Murphy has found the silver lining. For those of you in the timber industry, look out. Here comes Wendell Murphy. Looking back when you first got started and you decided this light bulb went off in your head about the feed mill, I mean, most young men probably don't want to be a pig farmer. I mean, that's not their dream.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and that goes back to what I said earlier. You have to do things that other people don't want to do. Of all the things my daddy taught me was he taught me to work and to enjoy working.
What do you guess he'd say today, 1995, looking at what's happened?
I remember the last time I spoke to my dad, I had shared with him our financial report for the current month back in June of 1990, and he looked at it and he said, well, looks like somebody's doing something right. That's about the closest time I think he ever came to actually approving of anything we were doing.
Still to come, only the strong survive, the pork industry's theory of evolution.
I said enough is enough. I knew I wouldn't make no money. They weren't even making no money. So you know what I would be doing.
We mentioned earlier that pigs will bring in more than $1 billion to North Carolina this year. That sounds pretty nice if you can afford to take part in the business. You see, while North Carolinians have always farmed pigs, the way we farm them has changed dramatically, and this new way of growing hogs and taking them to market costs money if you want to make money. And as Jim Payne reports, for some, the price is out of reach.
5 or 6 years, I didn't have but 6 sows and a male. I really made more profit off them than any other time.
Welcome to the old school of farming, and meet your professor, Matthew Grant. The subject is economics, the lessons of supply and demand, and nowhere will you learn more than in Matthew Grant's classroom.
This is where I had the sows.
You see, Grant teaches by example, and his chalkboard is his hog farm, which after running for 30 years, he shut down in 1991. The marketplace had soured, and hog prices had sagged.
When did you know in your heart that things had changed to the point where you were going to have to give this up?
We were 90 or 91 when the hog people came in, the corporate hog.
Grant is talking about corporate hog farms, farms like Carroll's, Prestige, and Murphy's, and they are at the heart of his economics lesson. In their massive confinement sheds, they are capable of raising millions of hogs per year, and that, students, is called supply.
I said enough is enough. I knew I wouldn't make no money. They weren't even making no money. So you know what I would be doing.
The problem was demand, or lack thereof. While supplies of pork went up, demand did not, and that is when prices fell. Family farmers with small operations and even smaller savings accounts were the first to go.
Did you get support from other fellow farmers along the way, people who maybe had dropped out ahead of you, saying, you know, you got to keep going, you got to keep going?
No, they tell you the thing you can do is get out and go.
The corporate farms survived, though, thanks to contract farming, part of the new school. Under contract farming, a grower lucky enough to get a loan and a contract provides the land and buildings. The corporation provides the pigs and the feed, and since both parties have invested less, they can afford to lose more when prices drop. A lot more than Matthew Grant.
Matthew Grant isn't the only family farmer to have given up. In fact, since the early 80s, thousands of family-run operations have shut down. Now, that may sound odd for an industry that's expected to contribute over $1 billion to the state's economy. Not really. Just call it evolution.
Bottom line, it's sort of like a natural evolution, so to speak. No one wants to see the small farmer, the family farmer, go out of existence. But economics again prevail. Contract farmers, contract growers dominate the market, no question.
And dominate they do. Back in 1984, state officials estimate there were 21,000 hog farms raising roughly 2 million hogs. Today, there are only 7,000 farms, but they are raising roughly 7 million hogs. And you don't have to be an A student in this class to figure out which farms have shut down.
Now that you're out, though, do you have any feelings of resentment?
Yeah, I have resentment on the corporate man. He didn't think about the people living out here in the stuff that had been raising hogs.
Somebody from one of those big operations came to you today and said, we want to set you back up in the business again, but we kind of want to do it on our terms. Would you get back in the business?
No, I wouldn't even get it on my terms. As long as they here, I ain't no.
Lesson learned, for Grant at least. But for the 5,000 family hog farmers left out there, it might just be time to study up.
So now what comes to mind when I say $1 billion? Well, maybe now you think of pig farming, but maybe you also think of something else. Maybe now you think of Wilton Parker and Keith Slocum, who are neighbors to a hog farm. And maybe you think of Matthew Grant, who after 30 years of running a small family hog farm has given up. Well, whatever comes to mind, whether it's the Matthew Grants or the very successful Wendell Murphys, you should remember this. Pig farming is big business. It is a business with benefits, but also one with costs. And as North Carolina searches for its next stable cash crop, we should insist that the benefits outweigh the costs. I'm Bill Leslie. Thank you for joining us. Have a good evening.
It's big business. We got a lot of dollars invested in the operation, and you just got to watch it and manage it.
You've got people who wouldn't think they'd ever change from tobacco to any other commodity, but they're doing it in the hog business.
I said enough is enough. I know I wouldn't make no money. They won't even making no money. But you know what I would be doing.
It's totally irrelevant to us whether we're the largest or not. We just want to make sure we're the most profitable.
I have nothing against someone trying to make some money, but I don't think he should do it at the expense of other people.
The farmer, I think he's the steward of the land. This land was handed down to us. We intend to keep it in our family and hand it down to our children.
When I talk to people on both sides of the issue, the farmers and the people downwind, I find that for many years they've been friends, that their families are intermarried, and yet today they don't speak to each other.